Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Progress America Unfiltered. I'm Tyler, and we have a special guest with us today who I'm going to let Rhett introduce. But first, today's topic of the show is very exciting. The world is on fire, but you know what else is? The blunt. So I'm going to pass it to Rhett to talk about, if you couldn't guess, we're going to be talking about marijuana and marijuana policy in today's episode. So Rhett, who is our special guest today?
Yes, for sure, Tyler. And we have Justin Strekal joining us today. And so Justin Strekal is our national marijuana advocate. And Justin has spent his career advocating for marijuana reform, marijuana policy, and all of that good stuff. And while I was just an undergrad student, I was recruited by this lovely individual to help him start his organization / PAC, BOWL PAC, which is better organizing to win legalization with the political arm BOWL PAC, a play on packing the bowl. And throughout our time together, Justin has been such a great mentor to me, teaching me everything about marijuana policy, and he's going to impart some of that wisdom on all of you today. And Justin, I cannot wait to hear from you, especially before I come to DC to see you later this week. So Justin, what is going on? Who are you? And yeah, tell us a little bit about weed policy.
Well, Rhett, if this is airing on 420 itself, we are going to be together in the Capitol, and I will soon speak after Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer talking about marijuana policy reform in a first ever event of its kind in the United States Capitol. So it's very, very exciting this week. Because in 2023, we're really never, we are closer than we ever have been before at ending the 80-year explicitly oppressive, mandated on explicitly racist tenets of marijuana prohibition. But you asked a question that I didn't answer, which is, who am I? I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. I currently live there. And I worked on political campaigns for 10 years, and I bobbed and weaved out of activism and advocacy, participated in Occupy Wall Street, participated in the anti-war movement in 2003. And after working a brief stint in the Virginia State Senate, working on a decriminalization bill in 2015, I got recruited to do federal marijuana policy. So I never knew that I wanted to do this when I was a kid, but sometimes you stumble backwards into an amazing opportunity, and I try to fight like hell every single day to make sure that I'm being a good steward of the political capital that has been generated over the last 50 years by advocates and activists who have worked tirelessly to end the federal criminalization of marijuana since Richard Nixon imposed it in 1971. But no, we got a lot to talk about. I'm really excited, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Justin. And so just to get started, you've already touched on this a little, but just for our audience who may not know or may not think too much about marijuana in their daily lives, what is the current state of marijuana in the United States? We've talked about prohibition, we've talked about criminalization, but can we kind of define those terms for people who may not know what that actually means in practice?
Yes, and this, I could get really into the weeds here, if you will, but I'll try to keep it at a higher level. So right now, the federal government has scheduled marijuana as a Schedule I substance, and under that definition, it has no use for either personal or medical purposes, and it has a high likelihood of addiction and abuse. We know through the data bears this out. There are literally tens of thousands of studies on PubMed.gov hosted by the National Institute on Health that demonstrate that it's clearly not a true categorization. Or accurate, excuse me. So at the federal level, it's completely prohibited. But currently, 21 states said YOLO and FU feds and have decided to legalize. So right now, 21 states, over 50% of the United States population lives in those 21 states because it's the bigger states, New York, California, etc., have legalized the substance and been setting up programs for adults to be able to purchase it legally through a regulated model. There's a hell of a lot to talk about where, forgive me, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on these websites. I hope that's okay a little bit. But
Go for it.
We have 38 states that have implemented a medical cannabis program where physicians in that state, to a varying degree, are allowed to recommend it for certain ailments or for anything that they should deem prudent, depending on the state. But every year, there are hundreds of thousands of Americans who are put into handcuffs and put into the judicial system and put into the criminal legal system, put into jail, as a result of marijuana charges, overwhelmingly for possession alone. And the data bears out, according to our friends at the ACLU, that the racial disparity in these arrests, despite similar consumption rates by race, is nearly 4 to 1. And here, I'm sitting right now in Washington, D.C., across the river in Arlington, Virginia. The racial disparity of arrests prior to Virginia decriminalizing was 8 to 1. And there's so much to unpack here. American marijuana policy interacts with every aspect of public policy, and it's also a fun topic to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely, Justin. And so you mentioned that we're taking our event on 420 into the United States Capitol to stand for marijuana legalization across the United States. But Justin, weed, of course, still is federally illegal. What is going on there? What is the difference looking like there? What is preventing us from legalizing weed at the federal level in this state of the game?
Yeah, no. So for folks who come to the event on 420 at the U.S. Capitol, I'm really hoping they don't bring cannabis with them. They leave it at home. They leave it in their cars. So, the biggest impediment right now to federal marijuana policy reform, in my view, is twofold. One, it's just political apathy. This is an issue without a country, if you will, where there isn't a highly organized, well-funded apparatus that is advocating and educating lawmakers. And we live in a country that has had 80 years of government-funded propaganda demonizing this substance and people who consume it through a racial lens, explicitly attacking Black Americans and Mexicans. That's one part of it. And then the other part of it is America's most hated senator, Mitch McConnell. As someone who has weaponized the legislative filibuster and essentially brought the United States Senate to a grinding halt to do the people's business, as long as he remains with ruling the Republican caucus with an iron fist, even though there are a number of Republican U.S. senators who we suspect would vote to end prohibition, they won't, because the political considerations for them are not worth it. They would lose the support of the Republican caucus leader, which means they would lose the institutional support and the money support. And there's one thing I'm very, very confident of in Washington, D.C., and that Mitch McConnell loves poor Black people getting arrested for having a joint.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's especially in his state of Kentucky, we know has large Black populations who are constantly, being put away for this. So we know that he's not on our side. But I do wonder, when you are advocating in front of legislators or advocating in front of, everyday people, what are some of the things that you bring up in order to explain why legalization, decriminalization is so necessary and so important and will be beneficial for us as a nation?
I love joking about this with Capitol Hill staff, where it's like, hey, do you want to go to a licensed distributor of intoxicants and talk this out more? And they're like, what? And I'm like, let's go grab a drink in a bar, right? Like, in our culture, we have so normalized the substance of alcohol, which by every observable metric is more harmful to our society, be it more harmful to the individual consumer or more harmful to public health and safety as a result of their intoxication and the deleterious impacts like car accidents, like domestic violence, like other things, where there have literally been no deaths associated with consuming marijuana, and just from a pure standpoint. So it's a critical thing that's been weaponized by the state to inflict violence and incarcerate low income and communities of color. I as an advocate, I spent 5 years as the federal lobbyist for this group called NORML, the National Organization for Reform Marijuana Laws, which is a consumer advocacy group. And I'm really in a unique place where I don't necessarily think that the tenets of American style quarterly capitalism is the way to go in marijuana reform. And at many times I find myself at loggerheads with lobbyists for the industry because I support highly restricting advertising. I support not allowing advertising to be tax deductible. It's 420 week, but it's also tax week. So I'll drop in a little tax reference there too. Because every single advertisement the public sees, that company is paying a lower tax rate for us to have the privilege to see that. And I don't want to see the marijuana industry replicate what we see, what we saw in tobacco before the federal government stepped in, and seeing cartoon characters and things being plastered all over the place. I don't want to see it like the alcohol industry, where we see explicit, like the like sexism and the patriarchy manipulated through media and advertisements promoting this. Marijuana should, from a consumer perspective, shouldn't be fostering a culture of cool. It should be, if an adult wants to consume the substance, they should be able to procure it legally and make sure that they know what it is. It should be that simple. Right now, one in 8 Americans report consuming cannabis at least once a month. So, depending on the polls you're looking at, 12 to 16% of the population is violating federal law on a regular basis. And that engenders disrespect of the law. It engenders a disunity and a disharmony within our social systems, because we're supposed to be this law and order country. But a significant percentage of our population, including a lot of the self-identified law and order conservatives, smoke weed and break the law all the time. So let's not have stupid laws on our books. Let's not have stupid criminalizations on our books. Let's let police actually go after things that actually harm our society, and let's legalize weed.
Yeah, and Justin, something I really have taken away from our time together with BOWL PAC has been that marijuana policy is really something that touches every issue of social justice that we can think of. And we know this because we have signed on to so many great petitions together for joint actions ranging from abortion right access to legalizing or protecting gay people across the country. Hey, we love that. And I just really think that this is an issue that maybe, when I was an undergrad, before I really got onboarded to BOWL PAC, I might have not thought about too much. Might have not thought about what it meant to have bodily autonomy in this way. But showing up for marijuana legalization is showing up for bodily autonomy and showing up for all of the different elements that impacts. So, of course, we mentioned abortion rights, gay marriage, equality under the law, all of that good stuff. And Justin, I just want to hear from you. Are there any other issues that you think that are really pertinent to the fight of marijuana justice that maybe I haven't mentioned, maybe that bring you into this fight? What is it that's got you into this game for so long and so strong?
Well, that's a dangerous question, right? Because I'll filibuster for the rest of the day on this, because marijuana policy reform touches every aspect of public policy. You mentioned LGBT rights. The first medical bill passed in the state of California was passed because it was an alliance between the LGBT community and the cannabis advocates to be able to get cannabis to those suffering from HIV/AIDS, because it mitigated the symptoms of that debilitating disease. Clearly this is part of reparative and racial and economic justice. We have the opportunity as a country, as a state, if we do it thoughtfully, to ensure that there will be opportunities for ownership for those who have been most marginalized. So I want to shout out to New York State, who is doing something really, really novel, and I think that so far it's coming along well, where they are saying they just legalized adult use, and the only people who can get licenses in this first window are people who they themselves or an immediate member of their family have been arrested for a marijuana crime. And when we look at the data and we see the economic trajectory of those who got criminal records when they were younger, it hurts their ability to get gainful employment at the beginning of their career, which will mean they lose, on average, over $1 million in earnings over the course of their lives. So if we want to lift up those who have been so firmly held down as a result of the war on drugs and, Nixon and Reagan and Bill Clinton, and other politicians weaponizing the war on drugs to turn poor communities and minority communities into police states, then we should be thoughtful and proactive. Because if we build that sophisticated of a machine to keep people down, they deserve it. We owe it to ourselves to build a sophisticated machine to lift everybody up. So there's so much to talk about here. I know we're running out of time, but I really encourage anybody who would be watching this video and listening to my thoughts that they recognize that there is an intersection, And no matter what issue it is that you advocate on, there is a cannabis hook. And you should be using that to your advantage, because marijuana reform is incredibly popular, near universal support amongst Democrats, near universal support, I think, anywhere between 75 and 85% amongst independent voters, and we see a majority of Republican voters as well. So use that to your advantage, build solidarity with the marijuana movement as well. It'll help engage voters who may be unlikely voters, maybe disaffected voters, maybe disillusioned, maybe never voted at all, but people can tangibly understand how marijuana criminalization impacts their lives and draw that line to government, so that way we can assert our small d democracy, because democracy is a verb. And together, we're going to legalize marijuana, and we're going to build a better society on every public issue.
I love that so much. I'm glad you touched on restorative justice. That's something that I'm personally super passionate about. And I think I speak for everyone at Progress America Unfiltered when I say that that's something that we're advocating for on every level, and especially marijuana policy. I'm joking. This joke popped into my head, but like, the war on drugs is over if you want it.
No, if bringing that up, forgive me, I omitted one thing. So BOWL PAC, in working with Progress America and so many other allied organizations and a couple of members of Congress, we had Rashid Tlaib, we had Jamal Bowman, and a couple other campaigns join our joint action to the Department of Justice. You might have seen last October, the president made this blanket statement and pardon of anyone who had a federal marijuana possession alone offense, which is a really relatively small number of people. It's mostly local and state cops citing people for that, and the federal government can't do anything about that directly. But the system that they built is a petition-based system. In order to get that document proving that you've been pardoned, to be able to take to employers when you're interviewing or housing or whatever, and you're being held back from, you need, the DOJ says it's going to take you 2.5 hours to do this. And that's if you know how to navigate these systems, which are incredibly complex. So we called BS. We're calling on the Department of Justice to automate those things. They know who have records. They should just proactively send out those pardon certificates to every single American who has those records. Justice is not justice if it's not known, if it's not actualized, and we need to make sure that we articulate that loud and clear. We've had over 50,000 people join this action with BOWL PAC and Progress America, and so many others, and together we're going to be heard. So thank you so very much, Rhett and Tyler, for all that you do to help put the broader progressive movement in context through Progress Unfiltered, and all you do moving forward. And hopefully we can talk about marijuana on a week in the future that isn't the marijuana week, and dive deeper into these conversations more.
Yeah, Justin, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Tyler, for joining and just for this amazing conversation. We will be sure to link BOWL PAC into the description of this video so you can sign on to our email list and find fabulous emails by Justin, by me, and keep up to date with these great actions, because there's always going to be something to add your name to, always something to stand in solidarity with when it comes to marijuana justice, when it comes to this larger fight for progressive politics. And if you're in Washington, D.C. and you are free on Thursday, 4/20, you should come to the United States Capitol for this fabulous event, the National Cannabis Policy Summit Forum, which is happening on Thursday in D.C. in the nation's capital, or the National Cannabis Festival, which is happening on Saturday, April 22nd, 2023. And if you want to come see 2 Chainz, as well as some other really great musical artists and some lawmakers, that will be happening then as well. So if you find yourself in the DMV, swing by. We'd love to see you. Come say hi. And as always, fight for marijuana justice this week and every week. Thank you all so much. Have a great one. Bye.